One of my favorite things about the Toy Story movies was the fact that they would use real toys a lot of the time. You'll see main characters like Mr. Potato Head or the Slinky Dog, which are a little altered from their real life counterparts, but for the most part, they're the same thing. They're toys that you had or other people once had in real life. There's other toys like the Little Tikes fire truck I had growing up. I remember really wanting it, and I actually had two of them, I think. They were all over the place in the 90s. There's a Russ Troll doll, and this is actually what the popular Trolls movies is based on, is one of these, the little popular toys from the 80s. And then there's Speak and Spell and lots of other toys. And then we get to characters like Buzz and Woody, who are fictionalized because, of course, they're main characters, but they're very loosely based on real-life toys. Buzz Lightyear is really similar to a toy I remember my uncle talking about from the 1970s called Billy Blastoff.
Eldon's new Billy Blastoff. Now he walks.
That's Billy's jetpack.
The jetpack on Billy's back powers his lunar crawler, runs the space-mobile, drives the moon tractor.
It was around the time that, like, space toys were all the rage and Western toys were sort of phasing out of popularity. In the first one, and then in the second one, they sort of go into Jesse's backstory and Woody having, like, Woody's Roundup and all that. Woody, on the other hand, seems sort of like a reference to the popular TV show Howdy Doody that had a lot of accompanying toy products. It was extremely popular in the time period. I remember my grandmother and my aunts and uncles and stuff talk about it every so often. I was like, what's that? So I looked into it. And I think the entire Woody's Roundup franchise is very loosely inspired by that. I remember hearing the animators talk on a special features of one of the DVDs that Woody was sort of based on older pull-string toys like the Casper doll. But I really think that it has a core in sort of like the Howdy Doody doll. So if you think of it, it's like a fictionalized version of Howdy Doody and Billy Blastoff. And that makes me think of, in the latest trailers, there's been a few toys that have been popping up that seem like references to older toys, but they've got entirely new names. I was sort of wondering why that is, why they use real toys and then fictionalized toys that are sort of inspired by their ones, and I'm not really sure there's like a clear answer to that. A lot of times it seems to be ones that are more narratively important, like Buzz and Woody are main characters that will appear on tons of products, and they wanted to make their own toys. But then you'll see a character like Barbie being a main character in Toy Story 3. She was also a semi-popular character in Toy Story 2 as tour guide Barbie, and they even had her voiced by Jodie Benson, who voices the Little Mermaid, Ariel. Some of the animators had mentioned that Barbie was originally going to be a main character in the first Toy Story instead of Bo Peep, which makes a lot of sense because Barbies are more commonly in children's bedrooms and Bo Peep is kind of a lamp, which makes her difficult to maneuver around because she's basically glass. I think that's why she didn't appear in Toy Story 3 because she would have shattered within like the first act or something. But she's appearing in the new Toy Story, which is exciting, in Toy Story 4. And I think that's why there might be bandages on her shoulder and wrist, because she probably broke at one point, because she's, again, a glass piece of a lamp. The reason Mattel probably didn't allow Pixar to use an actual Barbie doll in the first Toy Story is probably because Pixar wasn't all that famous in 1995. They were kind of just like an experimental CGI unit. Yeah, no one had made a full-length CGI film at the time period, which is kind of interesting because a few years later, Barbie started producing their own CGI movies. And because Toy Story was so successful and like boosted sales of things like Mr. Potato Head and other toys like that, I think that's actually the reason I got the Little Tikes fire truck when I was a kid, because I saw it in Toy Story and I was like, I want one. So then Mattel was like, actually, yeah, you can use Barbie. So then there's that whole scene in Toy Story 2 with the Barbie aisle, because they were like, yeah, this is gonna like boost some sales, so like, why not? Which is like a good marketing plan, basically. I think that's why Mattel partnered with Disney for the new Toy Story. And Barbie's going to appear again because it's kind of a moneymaker. Toy Story became like a huge moneymaker. So anyway, the point of this video is to go back to the new toys that appear in Toy Story 4, which I think is interesting. So there's this new doll called Gabby Gabby, and she's sort of like a villain, but at least she does appear to be from the trailers. And she's essentially a Chatty Cathy doll from the 1960s, which I think is sort of interesting because not a whole lot of young people know what that is, so they watch the trailer and it's like, oh, it's a spooky evil doll. But Chatty Cathy was an extremely popular toy in the 1960s. She was one of the earliest like pull string dolls that went up in popularity, and she'd say 11 things when you pull her string.
Oh Chatty Cathy, oh Mattel's famous talking doll. We pull the ring, and you say 11 different things. Let's play house. Please change my dress.
And Gabby Gabby is obviously like a reference to that. Interestingly, since she's playing sort of a creepy role, Chatty Cathy had actually had that happen before with the Twilight Zone, and they parodied her with the character Talkie Tina, which ultimately gets a guy killed. But I think it's really interesting that they chose to make up a character called Gabby Gabby instead of using the actual Chatty Cathy, because Chatty Cathy is also made by Mattel, who made Barbie. And since they're partnering for Barbie, you'd think they could just, I don't know, use Chatty Cathy and maybe Mattel could reboot the doll. The reason I'm thinking they chose to make a fictional Gabby Gabby instead of using the actual Chatty Cathy is because they plan to villainize the doll. So she's essentially an evil character, and Mattel wouldn't want their character shown that way, so they had to do a sort of fictional version of it. This is a way to, like, I don't know, people don't like their brands to be defaced in any way like that, but it could also be that Toy Story and Pixar were just planning to produce a lot of products with her and didn't want to pay licensing fees for each one. Like there's Funko Pops of Gabby Gabby, and she appears in Lego sets, and they're able to do those partnerships without having to partner with Mattel as well. So that's one reason I think could be behind it. Another toy that seems to have appeared in the trailers is a character called Duke Caboom, which is so obviously the character Evel Knievel from the 1970s, which was an extremely popular toy. This is another one that I remember an uncle talking about.
What a jump! Evil's riding the amazing stunt cycle. That gyro power sends him over 100 feet at top speed. Loop-de-loop! And he's not through yet!
A lot of people online have been saying, oh, it's like G.I. Joe, or it's like Ken with the motorcycle. And I'm like, no, it's really clearly just this stunt action figure, which he seems to be a good guy from the trailers, but if they couldn't use the actual Evel Knievel name, I'm assuming it's probably going to be that he ends up being a villain. Or, again, that they wanted to produce lots of merchandise with him. So it's either or, whichever one you want to go with. Also, the fact that Evel Knievel is based on a real person, a real stuntman from that time period that was so popular he got his own toy. Another new character that appears in Toy Story is this dummy. Well, there's 3 of them, but I believe it's based on the popular Charlie McCarthy dummies, which were based on a character from a TV show. And Charlie McCarthy dummy has kind of like a weird history because the guy who owned him and was his puppeteer left all of his money to the dummy and not his own daughter, so that's really weird. A lot of people seem to think that the dummy is based on the one from Goosebumps named Slappy, but that's not entirely true. I mean, it might be kind of like a reference to the creepiness of it, but dummies were creepy long before Goosebumps. They were sort of referenced that way in the Twilight Zone, and there's other shows and programs that have sort of gone that way because they fall in a sort of like the uncanny valley, similar to the Talkie Tina doll in the Twilight Zone, where a talking doll is a little odd to adults. And then one of the other toys featured is a little character, I don't remember its name, but it appears on Bo Peep's shoulder, and it seems to be a Polly Pocket. It looks very similar to the old vintage Polly Pockets, which, again, I don't know why it couldn't just be one, since, again, the Mattel Toy Company owns the licensing for the Polly Pockets, and the only toys that I've seen so far featuring the small Polly Pocket-like figure is the Bo Peep doll that is also produced by Mattel. I don't know why it couldn't just be like an actual Polly Pocket. I guess maybe this is an unpopular opinion, but I genuinely like when they use actual toy brands in Toy Story rather than making fictional spin-off versions of them, because it seems more realistic. These are like real toys that I've really played with and really seen. So, I don't know. Let me know your opinion in the comments, or if you caught any of these toy references beforehand, or if you learned anything new today. Anyway, like and subscribe, or whatever people do on YouTube. Bye!